Hey guys, what's up? I'm Kris Runge with Runge Cars, and behind me is my latest creation, the Runge Veleno. So over the last 10 years, I've had a ton of people reach out asking how I learned to build cars like this, how Runge Cars got started, and how I built my very first car. So I'm pretty excited to show you guys. We went back and documented my journey in metal shaping and also what inspired me to build my first car. So let's take a trip down memory lane and jump right into this. We're here at my family's farm in rural Minnesota, and this is where I built FF001, my very first car, and number two, my first commissioned customer's car. What's so cool to me about this barn is that this is the place where, when I was a kid, we had first Porsche that I had ever seen in person come in for winter storage. It was a little yellow 914, and a friend of our family had stored it here, and it ended up being stored here for several years, kind of almost somewhat abandoned. And my dad and one of his best buddies got permission to get it running. And so I was around 9 or 10 years old and got to see that car be brought back to life and started up and ran around the yard. And I would actually, when we had it stored, I would sneak out to the barn and climb in that car and pretend I was driving it. It really left a mark on me. So jump ahead, and through my teenage years, I would buy VWs and fix them up and sell them for a little bit more than what I had into them, and slowly worked my way into being able to buy a 911. And it was a 78 911 SC. It had been converted with all turbo parts, turbo suspension and steel flares. So it looked like a wide body Targa, which I thought was super cool at the time. I was 18 years old. And this was when you could buy a 911, keep in mind, for like $9,000 for a nice driver. So it wasn't today's money. You know, we were hardworking kids, and it took a long time to earn my way into buying my first 911. Fast forward a whole bunch of years, and I had several variations of 911s, 930 turbo, and all these different cars. And at one point moved down to Jacksonville, Florida. And it was at the Amelia Island Concours where I first saw the raw coachwork of the 1950s toolroom racers. For example, the Curtis 500X shown here. The stories revealed through the coachwork was captivating to me. Learning the history of what tools were used in the different areas of Europe to create these magnificent works of art was something I'd dream of someday trying my hand at. This reminded me of a book I bought and studied religiously at 16 years old. Excellence Was Expected. In the book, Ludvigsen tells the story of Walter Glockler. Glockler was a VW franchise dealer in Frankfurt, Germany, who after World War II, with the help of the brilliant Hermann Ramelow, built his own VW Eigenbau, or home-built, tool-room racer. The car was comprised of VW running gear situated mid-engine, wrapped in beautiful streamlined aluminum coachwork created by C.H. Weidenhausen. The car wasn't without its quirks, though, especially in regard to the handling due to the torsion tube being situated at the rear of the car. It didn't take long, however, for Glockler to overcome the handling quirks and become competitive in racing. So the Porsche family took note of the Glockler VW and soon after offered Glockler Porsche running gear. If you look at the historical photos of the car, you'll see the badging on the nose changed from VW Eigenbau to Porsche. The car was now campaigned as a Glockler Porsche. The car did so well that the Porsche family themselves went to C.H. Weidenhausen and commissioned 550-001 to be made, and the rest is history. But what's fascinating is that Glockler continued to have these little specials made. Information varies on just how many were made, but we're fairly certain there were at least 6 built. Some of the cars have gone missing, and some have been found. I've been told by multiple people that there were 2 Glocklers brought to the U.S. by Porsche importer Max Hoffman. One of those was found just outside of Denver, Colorado, and the other, according to legend, was bought by a college student and somehow made its way to Wisconsin, where it disappeared. The other neat thing about this story is that there was a whole group of privateers shortly after the war building their own toolroom racers and campaigning them. Each had their own unique designs and bodywork. They were a ragtag bunch of privateers, some of them even setting records, like the Peter Max Mueller car shown here. That's where my imagination with my first build really took off. What would I do if it was 1951 and I wanted to build my own Runge Eigenbau? I just couldn't kick the idea. I had to build my own car. I didn't have any plans to build a car to sell to anyone. I didn't have plans to build more than one. I just wanted to experience what it would be like to build and drive my own tool room racer. There was just one hiccup. I had never done anything like this before. I had no experience shaping panels. I only knew the basics of MIG welding steel. I didn't know how to coach build a car. I was fascinated with the idea and had read every book I could find on the subject. One thing led to another, and in 2010, I saw an ad for a 1967 Porsche 912 for sale in South Dakota. I wasted no time calling, and on the other end of the line was a little old lady who had sadly lost her husband to cancer. As our conversation went on, I asked if she had anything else she'd like to sell. She explained to me she had barns full of cars and parts, and she'd like to sell all of it to a good home. She also told me that her husband had built a Lotus 7 replica, and he had this tool called the English wheel that he was obsessed with. That's where my heart about stopped. I envisioned this giant Renala English wheel. Come to find out, it wasn't quite that. But I went out and met her. I bought the car, bought the English wheel, and as many tools as I could afford, and brought them back to my parents' farm where we are now, and set up a workshop on the main level of the barn. After tracking down the Formula V chassis and the remaining tools I would need, I started hammering away with the dream of building my car. I made the first cuts on the buck for car number 1 on December 11th, 2011, and over a 7-month period, through trial, error, and a steep learning curve, I was able to hammer and wheel out my first aluminum shell. In late spring of 2012, I rode the car outside and took it for a test drive. I was in love. The process of forming the body and everything it taught me, the history that I learned of coach building, it was all priceless. And now here I was in my own aluminum-bodied monoposto tool room racer. During the build, I periodically shared the project online where I had people reach out from all over the world to share tips and ideas. Car number 1 was completed in August of 2012. My uncle, being an old-school hot rodder who lived just down the road, would stop by the barn almost daily to see how things were going. He talked me into bringing the car down to his shop to paint it. He would typically be in his shop around 5:30 in the morning, and I would show up around 6:30. When I'd get there, he would have notes all over the car on what needed to be done. And my uncle was pretty blunt. Some of the notes read, "What the hell did you do here? What are you thinking? You can do better than this. Stop wasting your time." So slowly I took the notes off the car, hammered and dollied and straightened every area possible until one day there was no more notes. It was time to skim and do the paintwork. So we painted it there, and it turned out far beyond what I could have imagined. It was so much fun, and the memories of working with my uncle are something I'll cherish forever. So now the car was finished. It wasn't long, and I was asked to show the car at Cars and Coffee. There I was, parked next to a Dodge Viper of all things. The owner of the Viper wasn't exactly fond of this little Eigenbau car. His tipping point came when the little flyer was swarmed with people who were leaning against his Viper to take photos of the flyer. Needless to say, the flyer caused a bit of a sensation, and it was at this show where I met a gentleman who had inquired about having his own flyer built. Throughout the build, I frequently thought about how great it would be if everyone could experience the satisfaction I found in this process and drive a car like this. It didn't take long to land on an agreement to build FF002. This would be the birth of Runge cars and what is now possibly the world's most exclusive car maker. With my first 2 cars completed, photos started to circulate on the internet. It wasn't long and I was contacted by the website Mega Deluxe, who asked to share my story of building FF001. After the story was published, things started to take off. I was contacted by a gentleman from California who asked to commission FF003. His goal was to have a flyer comprised primarily of period components to race in the SCCA. It was at this time I decided to move Runge cars to my home garage. I initially took about 600 square feet of space out of our 3-car garage, but within a couple years, I would take over nearly every corner of the 1,200 square foot space. Runge cars 003 through 009 were built in the home garage between 2014 and 2019. Some of the highlights of this period were the acquisition of my Imperial English wheel and my reciprocating hammer. Both tools increased my efficiency and quality of work. 003 was the first Runge car to utilize the aluminum tube buck. This allowed the skin to be wrapped and welded to the tube buck, creating a lightweight yet strong sort of monocoque shell design. FF004 would be the first build to have suicide doors. It was built using my then new Imperial English wheel and the reciprocating hammer for panel forming. FF005 was the first Runge car to feature my own chassis design. Upon completion of the car, the new owner drove the Flyer from Minnesota to New York, covering 1,465 miles in under 28 hours road time, taking primarily back roads. 006, the RS, was an entirely new body design. Upon completion of 006, the car was invited to be shown during the 2017 Monterey Car Week in Pebble Beach at the Works Reunion Show. From there, 006 was invited to be featured on Jay Leno's Garage as well. FF007 was another new design, being a gullwing coupe version of the classic Flyer. It too was invited to be featured on Jay Leno's Garage. FF008 was the basic version of the Flyer design with a customer-provided power plant. 009 would be the Runge R2, which was started at my home shop and completed at the new shop. The R2 was an all-new design playing off the spirit of the pre-war Auto Union Streamliners, blended with early 90s supercar. It featured a stainless monocoque tub powered by a Porsche 993 3.6-liter engine with individual throttle bodies and Motec engine management, which was mated to a 5-speed Porsche 915 gearbox. All of this wrapped in the traditional lightweight Runge polished aluminum coachwork. RS010 was the first of the RS Coupe designs and the last of the short wheelbase Runge chassis design. It featured the first of the 195 horsepower Runge 2.3-liter power plants built by John Randolph. The car is currently on display at the Peterson Museum in Los Angeles, California. RS010 would be the final car built at my home shop. With an influx of new orders in 2018, I needed more space to operate. I purchased a 13-acre property and with the help of friends and family, built a new workshop. 011 is a privately reserved commission with no information currently available to the public. RS012 would be the second RS Coupe built, and this time styled with the cam tail for enhanced aerodynamics. RS013 would be the first of the long wheelbase Spyders. And today I present the Runge Veleno. What started life as a 2004 Dodge Viper Roadster has been extensively modified mechanically and with all new coachwork to create what I envisioned as a proper mid-60s GT coupe built for 007 himself. Let's check out the barn and see what's going on in here now. The old barn doesn't quite look the same today. What was once my workshop has now been returned to seasonal storage. The BMW E21 you see here belongs to my son. He purchased it as a basket case from a farmer in North Dakota when he was 16 years old and ended up doing a full mechanical and aesthetic restoration. He also designed and fabricated his own front and rear valance along with the side skirts, all out of aluminum. I bought this Westie almost 20 years ago, and with my wife and kids, we've driven it across the US 3 different times. So that brings us up to speed on how Runge Cars was started. Let's see what's going on in the shop today. So we have a ton of new projects going on in the shop, both personal projects, stuff my son is building, along with new customer builds. For example, this new chassis that showed up here, based off of an RS60 Porsche original race car, it's going to be an all-new body design, really cool project, and we're excited to document these builds in more detail for the YouTube channel. Another one of my son's projects is this 74 914 that was pulled out of a long-term storage, and he's been doing a full mechanical restoration on it. So this was his first full engine rebuild at 16 years old. More customer projects back here. We have another Runge RS Spider and the RS Coupe going on, and of course the Veleno. Thank you guys so much for following along on this adventure. It's been amazing, and make sure to hit the subscribe button for what we have coming up. It's going to be awesome.